Hey everyone, how you guys doing today? Uh, do another video on UV and a little bit of Fast API. Um, so I think the last time we were talking about, being able to install your own version of Python, which was really nice. So if you have a UV managed Python, I think uh, prior, um, what I had done was just manage the actual Python installation separately and use virtual environments with different Python installs, which was kind of difficult. Or the other situation where I pick Conda, where in Conda, in each environment, you can have its own Python channel, but Conda is just like a bloated mess a little bit. So it's really nice to be able to have like that simplicity of, you know, good package management along with um, managing the version of Python itself that you're using, especially because Python isn't nearly as obsessed with as other language ecosystems with making sure everything is back compatible. Um, and that's why it's important if you ever ship Python into development is to, you know, set up some capacity to keep updating the dependencies because otherwise, if you make too big of a leap, it can cause breaking changes. So we were also talking about running scripts and how you can have script specific dependencies. So if you have like a small script that's meant to run as a cron job, you can just set up the dependencies in line in the script itself. And then the script is like a one-stop shop. It has everything it needs to run as long as you use a UV Docker image to run it. It's totally fine. So that's really, really nice actually as a feature. Um, Using tools so you can use them one-off with UVX in a one-off environment that doesn't affect your current environment. Um, you can also hmm, okay, I don't think I went through this. Yeah, because I think I went straight to working on projects, right? Like what is the project structure like? What does it do, et cetera, et cetera. Um, yeah, essentially, whenever you do UV in it, all of this gets created. I showed that earlier. This is what a traditional PyProject TOML looks like. Have all your different files, managing dependencies. Um, it's pretty neat. Pretty good. So you can run commands. So like, if you want to start up a fast API app, it's UVcorn something something app, right? You can also do that with UV to make sure that the environment is logged and uses the same environment. Or you can just manually activate the environment in the terminal. Like I think it's source bin activate, something like that. Um, or .venv bin source activate and then run it like normal. But it's nice to not have to do that and still be able to just, run a command using UV. It's pretty nice. See, it even says here, alternatively, you can use UV sync to manually update the environment, then activate it before executing a command. Right there, boom. Instead of running it like this. Um, I didn't go too much into publishing packages because that's not really what I'm trying to do. I did go into the integration guides and the Docker guide. Marimo notebooks. So Marimo is pretty cool. This is nothing to do with UV, but I discovered it from here, and it's basically a Jupyter notebook offshoot that's really good. Also, what's really nice is I went through the PyTorch integrations, and it gives PyTorch has always been difficult for me for some reason. It's never perfectly worked. And this has elucidated a lot of why, because apparently there's many wheels that are published in different indexes. There's the PyPy index, which is only the CPU um, stuff, but I think it says so over here somewhere. Are hosted on the dedicated rather than the Python package index. As such, installing PyTorch often requires requiring projects. I think, right? See, okay, the CPU build is on download PyTorch. Yeah, okay, wait. Never mind, these are both on download PyTorch. Point is they're published to different indices, and you can get really deep into the sources that you define for each dependency, and also set up the sources based on like the system platform and stuff like that. There's a lot of deep stuff you can go into. So it gives you a lot of control over building some of these more complex packages like PyTorch, which is really awesome. And I know the groundwork for this, like this is a long-standing history that we've led up to this point. Um, wherein, I mean, obviously you had your Pippin setup tools got broken into Poetry and Flit and several other, I mean, not specifically, but just as setup tools stopped being sufficient. There became this fragmented approach in QVs trying to recondense and recombine all of these things into one while still keeping an eye to that extensibility and that accessibility across different Python projects, which is why they're very good about supporting the pip API as well. So Fast API is where I was most interested in, but honestly, it was pretty straightforward. It's like, exactly what we just went through a moment ago regarding how you work on projects, how you execute commands within that project, how do you execute a server app or whatever, and it's pretty straightforward. The interesting thing is like this dash dash extra, so that's how you add extra dependencies for a dependency. I don't know how else to because you call fast API standard and it has a few other optional dependencies I think that are tied to Pydantic. Um, it's just interesting notation because if you just do pip install, you just do fast API and then you use square bracket standard. It's pretty straightforward. There's really not much here, and that's when I started looking into fast API. Which, by the way, I just have to say the UV docs and the fast API docs, they're really good. And honestly, just going through these and reading them all can teach you just a lot about stuff like why your PyTorch install is broken. Fast API is I am currently reading the async await stuff, but honestly, it's most of this page is about explaining the difference between concurrency and parallelism. Um, which by the way, if you don't know, the primer is essentially like concurrency is like if there's two tasks to be done, I'm gonna go up to this task until we hit a point where there's gonna be something that needs to be done that's gonna take a while. And then while that's taking a while, I'm gonna switch to this task, move it forward. And then once this one is done, or once this one hits a point where it's taking time, it comes back to this, and then this one starts moving forward, right? So that's concurrency. And then parallelism is just everything is moving separately at the same time. Um, and you can have concurrent parallelism as well, which is another thing. Um, I mean, it's the same, but it's just a combo, right? And web tasks, web APIs, and things like that are better for concurrent um, concurrent paradigms because it doesn't involve a lot of compute heavy parallelizable tasks necessarily. Like for example, if you're doing, I don't know, some sort of deep learning something something, right? Uh, all the GPU cores get engaged in these massive vector manipulations and things like that that can happen parallelly, like one's input doesn't affect, or at least parts of it can happen parallelly. Wherein, like, for example, if you're doing the back propagation or something, um, the entirety of the first layer, which is still a lot of vectors, or the second last layer, however you want, like that can be all done together, right? And there's many other tasks like that. That's but whereas web stuff, it's more like, yeah, just I'm getting a lot of stuff, but I can't just throw a shit ton of compute at any one task and it'll go faster. No, it won't, because it's mostly going to be IO bound. Some sort of network call is happening, or some sort of read or write from disk, or read or write from database, or et cetera, et cetera. Some sort of IO bound task. Um, which is why it's concurrency is generally what's preferred or what is needed for a web task. Now, obviously, you can get concurrent and parallel, and that's a whole different story. And I have to admit, the UV docs and the docs are really good because, like, the Python types intro, this was actually really nice. It was very, very detailed, bringing in, talking about the history of how this worked, how it works currently in Python 3.10. For example, all that union stuff I was doing by importing from typing in my first video here, fucking useless. Didn't need to do any of that because you can just use, where is it? Can just do this. I can use this, and that's essentially stir or none. That's what union is also doing. It's like can be string or whatever, or int or float or whatever. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Anyways, this is just me meandering about talking about what I did today because I did not have time to really think this through and talk it through. I went through a lot of things. I also like made a small decision regarding my project. I was initially thinking like, oh, I'll do an MCP server and make it agentic. It is an LLM related project, so but then I was like, it's adding preemptive complexity, which could also, which A means is scaling is going to be difficult, and B, it means that it's going to be more expensive. Agentic tasks tend to chew through a lot more tokens. So hopefully want to avoid that. Um, yeah, so I just kind of tossed the MCP stuff. That's why I managed to start going deep in the first API because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be calling the OpenAI endpoint a bunch based on what I get on my endpoints, right? Just- I'm I'm gonna receive requests on my API. My API is gonna make requests to OpenAI. It's that simple as that, and that's essentially what is all that it needs to be, I think, at this point in time. And if it evolves to something bigger, we can come back to these things. But like you want to strike that fine balance where you want to make things as production ready as possible while you're working on it, but not overcomplicate it. And those two can be very distinct, like spending a lot of time on making sure like you are using spending a bunch of time making sure that you're using the right tool is okay. Spending a lot of time adding additional tools or tool types that you don't need, like MCP or agentic stuff or whatever, that's not a good idea, you know? Um, and I know this is me going against the grain because it's like the traditional motto is what, move fast, break things. I don't agree with that motto necessarily. I think that there's a balance between, not getting bogged down in stupid bullshit and not even trying to think things through. Oof, that's a lot of random stuff. I'm gonna call that the end of the video for today. See you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.